Hey, Jesse. It's Gary from the How Many podcast. Man, congratulations on the anniversary of Setlustingbruce. Now, I'm no hero, that's understood. But way back in the glory days of my hometown, I would have been just out in the street, waiting on a sunny day, No clue that someday I'd work for the guy that would run the best Bruce Springsteen podcast this side of Atlantic City. I've never been to Thunder Road, but I'd rather be there than the streets of Philadelphia. I mean, I'm probably better off catching a downbound train to the land of hopes and dreams, maybe in some brilliant disguise, probably a state trooper or something like that. You see, I was born in the USA. Growing up in this hard land has taught me a few things while roaming the back streets. We're tougher than the rest. Doesn't matter if I'm on fire or I'm just dancing in the dark. Nope, because the night I take a stolen car racing in the street down to the river. Even if I should fall behind, there will be no surrender. Yep. Just start that New York City serenade because I'll be the spirit of the night. So shut out the light. Party's over. Congrats, buddy.
I know I really started to listen to some of his deeper cuts right around the time that Tim Russert died, actually. Back in 2008 I think that was. I was a huge fan of Tim's, being the political nut that I was, even right at the beginning of my college age years. That Bruce, and some fans may remember this, Bruce zoomed in, zoomed to Tim's memorial service and played an acoustic version of Thunder Road.
Right.
And, I had heard Thunder Road before, of course. It was one that got some fairly regular radio time on the classic rock stations around here. But that was the first time that I'd heard it as the acoustic version. Really the first time that I had really listened to and made a conscious effort to comprehend the lyrics. And so I do remember that being kind of the catalyst for listening to taking his music more seriously and listening to it in greater detail.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and joining me today is one of my new internet friends, Colin Davis. Colin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, it's great to be here, and nice to be able to talk Bruce with anybody, but especially nice to be able to be here with you.
Well, I am excited. I am looking forward to visiting. Why don't we get started? Tell us a little about yourself. Give us your elevator pitch.
Oh, my elevator pitch. I'll do the best I can here.
Okay.
It may be a long elevator ride, but I'll try and keep it interesting and short. But so I don't know when we'll air here, but there's a good chance I'll be 32 by the time the episode airs. I turn 32 next week. So
yes.
I live in Canton, Illinois, which is what I generally tell people is about halfway between Chicago and St. Louis, a little bit southwest of Peoria, Illinois.
All right.
It's a big city. Married to my wife of nearly 5 years, Katie. We have a daughter named Autumn who will be, again, 3 before this episode airs. She turns 3 on Friday. What is today? Today's Wednesday, so she turns 3 in a couple days. We have 2 cats, a white German Shepherd named Pearl. I am a graduate of Knox College in Galesburg. I was a political science major, minors in journalism and history. I played baseball there. I was one of the editors of the school paper, among a lot of other things. I have a master's degree in political management from George Washington University in DC. As far as who I am, just as a person, I tend to think I'm a pretty eclectic guy. My day job is that I am in charge of the institutional advancement department for a small community college called Spoon River College. So for all intents and purposes, I'm a professional fundraiser is what I do for a living. I run a not-for-profit that is specific to the college. And so in my previous life, if you will, I was a political campaign critter, worked all positions and levels of political campaigns from local to national to presidential. I continue to do some political consulting on the side, kind of as a gig behind the scenes in the evenings. And because of that and my degrees, I also occasionally will teach political science for Spoon, where I work. And I also help as an assistant coach for our baseball team. So professionally, that's who I am. I still occasionally will play baseball in the summer. I golf very poorly. I like to say that golf plays me. I don't play golf. And enjoy traveling, especially occasionally for Bruce shows.
Yeah.
My most eclectic hobby, which is probably the one that I am most known for in the online world, is that I am a photographer and a storm chaser. And so I travel across the Midwest and the Great Plains in search of dramatic skies and supercell thunderstorms and tornadoes, which I have done since 2002.
How did you get into that?
Oh man, I don't really exactly remember how I got into it, other than I remember that it's entirely my mom's fault, because when I was growing up, about the time I think it was 6 or so, is when the movie Twister came out, and she took me to the movie theater to see it, and it's been a lifelong obsession ever since. I was very interested in weather and meteorology growing up. Finally decided to kind of take the leap into pursuing it when I had a family friend who was also interested and willing to drive me around until I could get my own license. And meteorology wasn't, at the time when I was in college, it wasn't a great field to get into. It's much better now in terms of employment opportunities. But I kind of have the best of both worlds. I was able to pursue, politics was another passion of mine when I was in high school and college. It still is now, but in those days, that was a big passion of mine. I was able to kind of do all the meteorology stuff on the side without having to do the math and the math that is required to be able to do operational meteorology.
When you were in college, what position in baseball did you play?
I pitched.
Okay, you were a pitcher, huh?
Yep, solely a pitcher. Yeah, once I was a decent hitter in high school. I played corner infield for the most part, a lot of third base, occasional first base when I didn't pitch. But it was solely to pitch once I get to college. They didn't want any part of my bat. I don't blame them.
Okay, very nice. But you were able to play all, through your whole college career?
Yeah, and I'll say beyond, not in a professional sense. I've been fortunate enough that there are some very competitive adult leagues here in Central Illinois, including one that is the longest running amateur baseball league in the United States, the league. And so there are ample opportunities for me to be able to play. The last 2 years or so, that hasn't been the case with COVID.
Yeah, of course.
For obvious reasons. It's been available to me this year. I just haven't taken advantage of it, unfortunately. But I learned a lot of life lessons playing collegiate athletics, and a lot of things that I use in my work and my everyday life now that I wouldn't trade for the world.
Do you still pitch when you're playing?
Yeah, when I play, that's what I do.
Oh, very nice.
It requires a couple more ibuprofen than it required in college.
Very nice. I have tickets toward the end of August for to go see the Astros. They're going to be here in Arlington to see the Rangers, and I'm excited about seeing the new ballpark.
Oh, I've heard it's beautiful.
Yeah, I love the old ballpark, and I am in the grumpy old man, like, I don't know if we needed a new ballpark. This one was pretty good, but I do think that I will enjoy the air conditioning, now that it has a dome. But
Sure.
yeah, that's cool. Now,
Well, I am from kind of the area where I went to college is kind of the area that as a Rangers fan, you probably recognize the name Jim Sundberg.
yes, absolutely.
Jim was a native of Galesburg and still is. He doesn't live around the area, but you can still catch him around the area from time to time. And
Yeah.
Super nice guy. I mean, as nice as you would expect him to be off the field, and
Yeah.
obviously a huge fan favorite in Ranger world.
Absolutely, just a class act, and
Yep.
and truly, one of our, we as a Texas Ranger fan, you don't have that many, iconic players. So,
Understood.
so Sundberg was always just somebody, and did a lot of work on, on the TV and radio. So yeah, good guy, really
Yes,
good
he is.
guy.
Yep.
Yeah. So are you a fan of professional baseball, or do
I
you
am. Yeah, I'm a Cubs fan and kind of in
Okay.
mourning right now. For those who aren't baseball fans who are going to be listening to this, the Cubs won the World Series in 2016 for the first time in 108 years. And just this past week, we had the trade deadline in the MLB, and the Cubs dealt away several of the core players from that 2016 team that were big time fan favorites, and at least in the case of one of them, I think were expected maybe to continue being with the Cubs maybe for the rest of his career.
Yeah.
In Anthony Rizzo. But times change, and it is a business first and foremost, unfortunately, and players kind of have to come and go at the expense of the emotions of the fans for the long-term betterment of the franchise. And so those Rizzo, Bryant, Baez, even Kimbrel to a lesser extent, all big fan favorites, and all sent to other teams in exchange for some future prospects that hopefully will pan out.
Yeah, the Rangers traded Joey Galloway to New York.
Yep.
And there was a lot among the fans, because he was very vocal about wanting to be a Ranger. It's very rare that the Rangers are able to take someone from their farm system and build them up. And he had gotten better for the long time. He home runs or strikes, and he had gotten better at getting walks.
Yep.
And
and the power's never been a question.
Right. Yeah. And so, but Scott Boras is, he is a very good agent for his players. Yes, he is. But he is so we were kind of sad about that. And then you have and I promise listeners, we're going to get to Bruce in a minute. You also, then you have are they going to do anything with these prospects? Right? Like you had a player that was good, and I realize the Rangers are horrible right now, and they're not going to be good for another couple of years. But it does seem it doesn't always work to cross back where you trade Herschel Walker, get all the picks, and Jimmy Johnson, makes his magic and gets 2 out of 3, 2 out of 4, 3 Super Bowls over 4 years, with that staff. That doesn't always happen that way.
No, it's pretty rare that it does. But in the Cubs and the Rangers cases, I think that the thought process is these are younger guys that you're going to be able to have around longer term,
right?
And that if 2 of them pan out into good, solid, everyday ball players, then you can build the rest in free agency. And so it's always just a balancing act, I think. And
and for those of you who may not be sports fans, think about how a few people were upset when Morello joined the E Street Band for that, when little Steven was off doing Lilyhammer. And a lot of people are like, oh, we don't need that. Anything that needs to be done, Niels or Bruce could do. And by the way, I enjoyed Morello. I thought you could tell he was having a blast. I mean, you could just tell he just enjoyed the hell out of it. But just imagine that, if the E Street Band, you let let players go and drafted other ones and got this, and and didn't have that core group that
Yep.
we've been lucky enough to have, for with certainly missing Danny and Clarence, but overall it's been a core group that we've been able to enjoy for a lot of years.
That's a fantastic comparison, actually, and a nice segue. So well done on your part there.
Well, thank you. Hey, I might get good at this if I keep it up. All right. So, Colin, I always like to go to the beginning. So you said you grew up there in Illinois, right?
Yep.
Yeah. What kind of music did your family listen to?
Sure. So I'm very grateful that I had family who really introduced me to a wide range of music as I was growing up. Mom especially was a frequent NPR listener, and my dad. And so the local NPR station here is when they're not news, it's classical music. And my dad actually sang in the Met Opera in New York City in the early 1980s.
Wow.
So I got my share of classical music growing up. Both of them were and still are heavily involved in performing arts, and so. I was exposed to plenty of musicals and show tunes growing up. My grandparents were country music fans, but largely the old stuff. So, I'm not personally not a huge fan of some of the newer country, but I do love, because it was kind of instilled in me in the younger days. I do love the Willies, the Whalens, the Conways, people like that. As well as some folk music, but my parents really got me hooked on music from the 1960s to the 1980s, which is kind of my forte. Both, I was going to say outside of Bruce, but Bruce obviously fits right in.
Yeah, it does.
The latter half of that.
So, Colin, as you started to grow up, it sounds. Did you run through a rebellious stage where you were kind of rejecting your parents' and grandparents' music and finding your own, or you kind of?
So only really with the Broadway musicals and show tunes, and not because I disliked it, but I think you're onto something with the rebellious phase. That it's not so much that I had a rebellious phase; it's that I grew up almost, when they're doing several performances a year of musicals and plays, I kind of had it shoved down my throat. Isn't the best way to verbalize it, but that's all I'm coming up with here.
Yeah.
But to the point that I didn't resent it, but it just became less enjoyable. And so it's not, even today, they're not my favorite. I do, of course, support my parents and everything that they do in the performing arts, and they're very fortunate that Katie is a huge Broadway nut. It's generally a fight in the car whether we're going to be listening to Sirius XM on Broadway or E Street Radio.
All right.
And so even though it's not my thing, my parents have Katie to talk through in Broadway musicals with. So it wasn't really so much a rebellious thing as much as it just was, I had enough of it and got kind of sick of it. It's where you eat cheesecake and cheesecake and cheesecake, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I just really don't like cheesecake anymore. It was that kind of, I can't imagine not liking cheesecake, of course.
No, but I did go through this spell where I had eaten so much cold cereal growing up that, in my early 20s, I'm like, oh, no. And then like in my 30s or 40s, I went, wow, cold cereal's really cool for a change of pace. On Sunday, you don't feel like cooking, big old bowl of Raisin Bran or something, So yeah, I get that. When did you discover Bruce, and can you say what about him spoke to you?
Yeah, well, let's start with the first part. I truthfully cannot say that I remember the exact moment that I would say I started listening to Bruce. I'd always been kind of familiar with and really enjoyed his more famous songs.
Sure.
And if there were a Spotify equivalent back in the day, a lot of those were in my Spotify equivalent, and that kind of goes back to that 1960s and 1980s being my forte. it just naturally fit in there. You know, the early stuff with Greetings or Wildly Innocent, Born to Run, Darkness, all of that, and even The River and Born in the USA played enough on one of my local radio stations that I loved growing up that is no longer in existence. But I know I really started to listen to some of his deeper cuts right around the time that Tim Russert died, actually. Back in 2008 I think that was. I was a huge fan of Tim's, being the political nut that I was, even right at the beginning of my college age years. Then Bruce, and some fans may remember this, Bruce zoomed to Tim's memorial service and played an acoustic version of Thunder Road.
Right.
And I had heard Thunder Road before, of course. It was one that got some fairly regular radio time on the classic rock stations around here. But that was the first time that I'd heard it as the acoustic version. Really the first time that I had really listened to and made a conscious effort to comprehend the lyrics. And so I do remember that being kind of the catalyst for listening to taking his music more seriously and listening to it in greater detail. What about it spoke to me, despite not really knowing the time or when I discovered Bruce, if you will. I do know I was hooked for life when some of the music channels on TV, the VH1s and things like that would occasionally play the full concerts of not just Bruce, but a lot of different artists, but specifically the Madison Square Garden DVD from the reunion tour, and then of course the Barcelona show from the Rising tour, and those got me hooked for life. I do absolutely remember that because I'm not somebody that is generally prone to peer pressure, but those audiences at those concerts in those productions convinced me that I was missing out on something. And the amount of genuine fun, I guess you'd say, that Bruce and the band were having on stage, that was palpable through a TV screen. And I'd been to plenty of concerts in my life, but none of them looked or felt, is probably the better way, of saying it, like those concerts did to me. Specifically in the Barcelona show, the solo version of Incident on 57th Street, where he's just playing the piano. That was the song and the performance that reeled me in. And like all of Bruce's best songs, in my opinion, it's the storytelling, it's the characters, and the relatability to your own experiences. So it's why I never have gotten tired or will get tired of Bruce or his music, but it sure seems like those things are kind of a common denominator for the people that I revere as the best songwriters of all time. Bob Dylan, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Carole King, John Prine, Gordon Lightfoot. All of them are behind Bruce, of course, for me. But they're all at the adult table, I guess you'd say, of the songwriters' Thanksgiving.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I can remember watching Russett's funeral,
Mm-hmm.
and like I think his brother-in-law or somebody did a Born to
Did
Run.
Born to Run on the guitar.
Yeah, it did. And
I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, and I remember it was I also big fan of his, in the whiteboard, he was Steve Kornacki before Steve Kornacki was,
right.
Right,
That's right.
and it was just that's a great moment. That's a good memory. So I always like to preface this, Colin, with the amount of times you've seen Bruce is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are,
Sure.
but because of circumstances, locations, age, but have you you've said you've lived through TV, but have you been able to go to
Yeah.
the live shows? And if
Yeah.
so, do you count?
I think I went back. I think I'm at 13.
Okay.
And for all the reasons that you mentioned, why I'm on the lower end of that spectrum is,
Yeah.
I'm on the newer end of the Bruce fandom, and really my more recent statuses as college student and young professional and
Right.
overworked and underpaid campaign staffer, where you're working 70-hour work weeks a lot. I wasn't able to hit a lot of the tours that were early on in my fandom. I Magic, Working on a Dream, that extended tour was going on really when I started getting into it. I did get to see a couple of shows on the Working on a Dream tour, both on the original Working on a Dream tour, and then when they swung back through the arenas later. And where I am, he didn't really come close on High Hopes.
Right.
But I sure as hell sold out on the River 2016, and I'm definitely glad I did that for sure.
Yeah, I same thing. It's one of those moments of, when in 2000, I guess 2012, when Wrecking Ball tour, he wasn't getting anywhere close to Dallas.
Right.
And my wife and I were wanting to do a vacation together anyway. And I've told the story multiple times. We ended up leaving from Dallas, driving up through Kentucky, doing half the Kentucky Bourbon Trail,
Nice.
going up, seeing Cleveland, seeing him in Cleveland, did the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, came back, finished the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, and then went home. And we called it our Bruce and Bourbon tour.
Hey, that sounds like a great tour.
Yeah, that's. I've had a couple of people go, that sounds like a perfect vacation.
No,
yeah.
I caught on Wrecking Ball. I caught night one at Wrigley, and that was about all I could muster. I was in them. That was, if I remember right, it was largely a fall tour. And especially when he came close, and that was an election year for me.
Well, and you also have a young daughter.
Yep.
And so and much like I've used this analogy before, much like when you miss an extra point early in a football game, the team seems to be chasing it all. I feel like I'm chasing concerts because 2002 was the first show I went to.
Yeah.
And so I feel like
I can relate to that completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I'm only 32 or about to be 32. So I mean, it's not like I've missed out on a lot of years of Bruce fandom.
Right.
But I feel the same way that I'm chasing those years that Bruce wasn't a bigger part of my life, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and I remember when the reunion tour was happening, I don't remember what, but something family oriented, something to do with my son, like he was involved, something to do with his school, and the night that Bruce was going to be here in Dallas, and I made the father decision, and now then looking back, it couldn't have been that important of an item, and I could have seen the reunion tour, but we're okay. So that's pretty funny.
You can't make the wrong decision when you make a decision to miss something like that for a family reason.
Yeah,
you're not making the wrong choice by doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. So let's talk about albums or songs that mean a lot to you.
Yeah.
And share me. And do you have any stories from the road, like any concert stories you want to share?
Yeah. So concert stories, I don't have a ton. Other than I think I have a very high rate of bringing first timers to shows compared to probably the average. I would say, and I've probably brought at least 10, maybe 12 or more first timers with me to these shows. And my favorite first timer, and this is I guess, a story to some extent. I took two of them to the Milwaukee show in the 2016 River Tour. One of whom had worked in radio for 30 years and various markets across the country, Las Vegas, Twin Cities. One of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met when it comes to music, and in fact, we're good friends anyway, so I would ask him anyway. But that musical knowledge, he's always one of the first people I ask if we're going to do a trivia night or something like that. One of the first people I call because of how good his musical knowledge is, and not just any one genre. I mean, the whole gamut. We never lose at trivia, partially because of him, but we sat in the very top row of the Bradley Center, as far as you could possibly sit away from the stage. And I'll tell you, I think, side note, I do think that is personally the way that you should go if you're a first timer, not necessarily being in the pit or down low. I think you want to be up high because so much of it has to do with the experience, and kind of the feel of the community around you.
Yes.
And I don't think you get that full experience if you're up close to the stage. I think you need to be back the first time that you go see Bruce at E Street. But I still remember the tone in his voice when he said, "Wow," when the lights went out on the very last drum beat of Two Hearts.
Yeah.
And another side note, the Meet Me in the City through the Two Hearts live is one hell of a way to introduce somebody
to a
show for the first time or to their first Bruce concert. But he is as big of a fan of Queen as you'll ever meet and ever find. Saw them in their prime, and I specifically remember him walking away from the concert in Milwaukee saying that Queen in their prime didn't compare to Bruce and E Street at age 65 or so.
Wow, that's impressive.
It's probably the single greatest compliment that Bruce and the band could get. Unfortunately, they'll probably never hear it, but
right.
To have somebody with that kind of knowledge and that kind of fandom of not even arguably, absolutely one of the greatest live bands, live acts that have ever walked this planet, say something like that about Bruce and the E Street Band, just an unbelievable compliment. And the other side note there is, I may be one of the very few fans out there who has actually seen None But the Brave be performed twice. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that is very cool. Yeah.
Trying to.
Well, while you're thinking,
a couple of the others,
yeah. While you're thinking, so I do another podcast called How Many, which is basically just an excuse for my buddies and I to get together and just and so the premise usually is we come up with a topic and then how many significant songs does a band have, and then we'll go through the list and we all vote and pick. So we've got an episode that's being edited, but we had a list of the top 75 rock frontmen.
Okay.
And then the discussion was how many do we agree are truly great frontmen, right? And of course we talked about is Dylan a great frontman? He's certainly, but does he perform on stage like Mick Jagger, right? Is it
right?
And the number one on the list was Freddie Mercury. I mean, and there was no doubt on that. So to hear someone who's that big of a fan talk about, and Queen in their prime was an amazing, I wish I could have seen them live.
Same.
You see Live Aid and you watch this, and you go, holy moly. And we went to Austin and they had a Killer Queen, which is and it was fascinating. I mean, it was great to watch him, this sound alike perform. And it was, they have so many good songs. So I agree. That's a pretty strong, compliment.
And from somebody, I can't really overstate the amount of musical knowledge and
Yeah.
experience that he has. So just, the type of person it's coming from. He's seen his share of acts and seen and listened to his share of talent.
So I might have, in fact, I will ask you to do an introduction, because I would love to have him talk about Queen and Cher on the show. I love that. That would be fun.
Yeah, you'd like to. Super like that.
That sounds great. So I've always wanted to go to see a show in Chicago. It seems like Wrigley and whatever, it seems like he always has, and I think every city could say that. Like Philly says, well, he always does something a little special. And then when we were in, my son and I went and saw at the end of the River Tour, that 3 nights at Metropolitan, and we saw the second night, and it was pretty interesting. But it does seem Chicago has an energy that is pretty cool. So that must have been fun to see him there.
I would say that's probably been the majority of the concerts that I've been to have been in Chicago. And, I have not found one that was subpar in energy. I would like to. I have not made the pilgrimage, so to speak, to see a show in Philly or at the Meadowlands or something where the special things often happen.
Right.
But I need to, because I would imagine it's fairly similar to Chicago, just the intensity bumped up a little bit.
Yeah, Dallas is not a good place. They, and I remember when the Cowboys were just starting to get good again.
Yeah.
The big hair and fake boob crowd, as my sports station talked about it, right? That they were there at the game because it was a place to go. It was a place to be seen, not because they're a huge football fan. And I sometimes feel the same thing, that there certainly are diehard Bruce fans that live in Dallas, but the crowd, because I've gone to, like when I was in Nashville, that was a really exciting show. Sure. It was a different electricity. And so I say that with, I love going to these different cities to kind of feel the moment. Like we drove up to Oklahoma City, and there was it didn't sell out.
Yeah.
And so we had the discussion, chicken or the egg. Does he not go to Oklahoma City because he doesn't get a lot of support, or does he not get a lot of support because he never goes to Oklahoma City?
Right.
So yeah.
So I've only been to one. I did go to I think it was Des Moines in the Working on a Dream tour. That was kind of similar. That didn't sell out. That I think I walked in. I don't know, maybe an hour before showtime, and they handed me a wristband, and for my general admission ticket, they handed me a wristband, and I walked up 4 rows from the stage. It filled in to a certain extent, but I almost felt like, because that's still one of the better ones that I've gone to, that Bruce has got that little competitive edge that says, I'm going to show you guys, and make the people who didn't make it to the show regret not having been there. And to some extent, you're going to have that, I think, with every city and every act, that some of it's just going to be, some of the places just going to be filled with people who are looking to get out for the night and drink some beer and hear Born to Run and Dancing in the Dark play because they've heard it on the radio.
And there's
but it's I'm trying to remember. I don't remember if it's Donna from Bruce Funds or who it is, but always makes the point that it's always somebody's first show.
Yes.
So even those folks, in a lot of cases, they might have come because of the name and they left because they're fans, and you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and I've talked about that, and yes, it is Donna who said that. In fact, that was on the back of one of her Bruce Fund shirts. And I make that argument too when, like, I have a buddy who'll go, well, do we really need to hear Born to Run again? Let me, take out Born to
Yep.
Run and let's do None But the Brave, or,
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, but someone is at that show that's never
Right.
seen Bruce,
That's
and,
right.
you want to have that. Um, I I love the idea of, and I've said there's two kinds of people: the people that go to the show and go, wow, that was long,
Yeah.
and the people that go, oh my goodness, I've never seen anything like this, and
Yeah.
become fascinated. Because it is a story I hear often doing this is, I didn't get it till I saw it live.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't get it till I saw it, right?
Yeah. My parents are perfect examples of that.
Yeah.
When even in my early Bruce fandom days,
Yeah.
my mom was always not disrespectful, but she never really dug into Bruce, because she's
Yeah.
like, I can barely understand what he says sometimes anyway.
That's
And it's like,
exactly what my wife said.
I'm
Yes.
like, just trust me,
Right.
knowing the type of music that she likes and the type of songwriters that she likes. In fact, a lot of the same ones that I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
Just trust me, come to the show. She's been 3 or 4 times with me now, and she got it immediately.
Yeah.
And that was what it took. And I finally got my dad to go to the last one that I went to, which was on the arena swing of the River Tour in 2016.
Mhm.
Same way. He can be stubborn, like any of us, I guess, and certainly the tree didn't grow far from where the apple fell in that
Yeah.
regard. But likes to. I kind of liken him to a cat in some ways, that it needs to be his idea for it to be
Yes.
a good.
Yes, I understand that. Yes.
I'm not going to tell him that I did this just so he doesn't have to hear that, but I'd probably say that to his face anyway. But in the days after the show, I'm getting 6, 7 text messages from him. Hey, what was this song? What was that song? Because he's going home and looking them up and
Yeah.
listening to them again.
Yeah.
And so he got it. She got it. Katie was the same way, that she was fine with Bruce, but when she went to the live show, that's when it really started to hit home for her too. And now she, he's got either 3 or 4 Bruce songs on her normal playlist that she uses when she goes on a run.
Yeah.
And not just, I mean, they're
Yeah.
things like Candy's Room and Roulette. I mean, they're deeper cuts.
So when Linda went with me to 2002, he was doing The Rising, and so she didn't know any of the songs, right?
Sure.
He did Work on the Highway, which made her happy.
Yep.
But so she said, did you have fun? And I said, look, if he had gone out, played Born to Run, and then left, I would have felt like I got my money's worth.
Yeah.
This is, bucket list, hearing Bruce Springsteen do Born to Run live. And so when we were doing our Bruce and Bourbon tour, she really liked Wrecking Ball.
Yeah.
She liked that CD. There were several songs she really liked. And we, driving up there, we would spend time where I'd play a song and she would Google the lyrics to read along.
Yeah.
And the other thing I told her is, because she had the same concern, like, he mumbles, I can't understand his lyrics. And I said, think of it as an instrumental. Just think of his voice as just another instrument, like Peter and the Wolf or something. Just listen to the emotion in the song. And that helped her. And the second time she went, she had done a little bit of work. So she knew at probably a third of the songs, maybe half.
Yeah.
And kept looking at me. You didn't show me this one. You didn't play me this one. And I'm like, okay, let me explain how Bruce changes this around, Linda. And so
you never know from night to night.
Yeah. So she's now seen him 3 times, and she has said next year, she goes, I know you want to go to many shows as you can, but if there's any way possible, I want to go at least one show with you. And I'm like,
Awesome.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, that's fine.
And funny you mentioned, Wrecking Ball for her. If I had to take a guess, going back to my dad, I knew he knew or had an idea on, I don't know, maybe a third of the songs probably. The Born to Run, the Born to Runs, the Badlands, the trying to remember what else was played that night, but you get my the Promised Lands, things like that he might have heard on the radio here and there. But I think the one that did it for him was Jack of All Trades.
Yeah.
I don't know this, but I would guess that he saw, some of himself, certainly some of his dad in that, my grandfather in that song, and I think that Bruce is beloved by so many people because he has the ability to make the radio worthy rocker whenever he wants to. I mean, the Born to Run, Dancing in the Dark, even Ghosts now are perfect evidence of that. But I think the reason that those of us who are more hardcore fans that immerse ourselves, I guess you could say, in Bruce's music, is because of his ability to develop characters, tell stories that speak to our own experiences, and really impart life lessons on us from a really wise place. Bruce, and still coming across when he does that, still coming across with a genuine humility and down to earth nature of it. The way that I don't know if this is a fully original thought, because I think I heard something along these lines, but I'm going to roll with it here in my own words a little bit. Bruce doesn't just tell his own story and ask you to come along with him. Bruce is telling your story, and he gets you involved in that story before you have the opportunity to make a decision. Before you even have the opportunity to decide that you weren't going to walk the direction that he's taking you.
I totally agree.
I think that's what has developed him such a loyal fan base, in addition to the size of the fan base.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love Jack of All Trades, and was in the first time Linda listened to it, the ending where he said, "If I had me a gun," like she goes, "Where did it take this dark turn? What we're going?" Just so much goodness and gun. I do want to take just a little bit of a detour.
Sure.
You mentioned being involved in political campaigns.
Yeah.
What led you to want to do that, and why did you decide you wanted to do something else? Take me through that journey a little bit.
So it's one of those cases I never really can pinpoint exactly what it was that led me down that path, but I do remember my mom had worked some political campaigns, including like a state representative in a congressional race when I was really young, and I remember I vividly remember the 2000 election, and all the analysis and everything that was going on the night of there. Not to get too crazy personal with ideology, but it was right about the time that Barack Obama was running for president, when I kind of made the shift from meteorology to political science. It was my way of I always kind of felt like I had good instincts in it, first of all, but that was my way of saying, hey, I can do something that's going to change the direction of the world, so to speak. And so that was the first political campaign that I ever worked on, was the Obama campaign. And then I enjoyed it so much. Of course, it helps when you're successful.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it so much that was right at the time that I was beginning college. And so while I was working the campaign, I'm taking classes that work toward that degree and would be useful in working in politics.
Yeah.
But then, like I said, taking a very small part in a successful campaign then leads you to, okay, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
This is something that you enjoy and that you want to continue being a part of, and so I did. The reason that I changed paths after that, and it's not, I don't even say that I changed paths because I'm still very involved politically.
Yeah.
It's I'm involved with the local party here. I still have some very, very good friends in Springfield, Illinois, here where our state capital is, and in DC that I will call upon, and good connections with most of my elected officials around here. But what really pushed me into the direction where I am now, and into the educational fundraising, is that the long hours, first and foremost, on the campaign did not lend themselves well to having any kind of a relationship or a family or anything like
Right.
that. And so that pushed me a slightly different direction. But it's really not, what I tell people is what I do now is so similar, because literally every skill that I learned or developed in political campaigns, I'm using now.
Yeah.
I did a lot of fundraising on political campaigns, first and foremost, and second of all, a lot of what I do is trying to build coalitions for a common cause.
Yeah.
And all fundraising is the same. It's matching a prospective donor and their wishes to a cause that they can, or a problem that they can help solve.
Yeah.
And this was something that I wasn't going to make 50% of the people mad at me just by telling them who I worked for.
Yeah.
Educational fundraising is a much easier sell, I guess you could say. So I keep my feet in the political waters because it's such a passion of mine.
Yeah.
But what I do now is not at all dissimilar to what I have done on campaigns before.
I can't remember what pundit said it, but they said that the reaction to Bruce's Super Bowl ad on the both extremes tells you how far away we are from a middle.
Yeah,
and I thought that was really, because I, as a Springsteen fan, in fact, when it happened the night before the Super Bowl, I actually thought that it might be fake, that they had taken outtakes from Western Stars and put it together, because there's some really creative people out there that they'll do fan trailers for a new super, some kind of comic book movie, and they've just pulled things and they built it, and so I was like, hey, this is it. So I understood what he was trying to say and that message. And I do know that I went to dinner with one of my best friends from high school and last week, and he's very, very conservative, and I've over my years have become very, very liberal. And I just let him speak because I love him and I don't want to try to convince him, change, so it is kind of, I love your statement, though it's a little sad that half your audience immediately wants to turn you off when you say, I'm here for this.
It was, I'm obviously on the same side of the ideological spectrum and would consider myself to be generally pretty progressive. I mean, not, maybe not like super far left, but pretty far left.
Yeah.
And I remember even having to defend that ad with people that I know to be further left ideologically than me.
Yeah.
But I also come from a little bit of a unique place in that when I worked for, I used to work for a couple of state senators here in Illinois, including one
Yeah.
who was in leadership in the assistant majority leader seat. And so to some extent, I got to have some interaction with senators on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah.
And I knew, even as a young impressionable kid, that their ideology might not align with mine, but a lot of those guys and ladies were still there for the right reason, just different direction on how they get to the end goal.
So
I have my my concerns that we've gotten away from that.
I agree. And
but even as recently as 10 years ago or so, I still felt that in general, everybody was still coming from or toward the right end, just different means to get there. But so I guess I've always seen the value of what compromise can mean and how that can be good governing, even though we may ideologically only get, sorry, I can have a bug that keeps flying around.
No, that you're good.
I'm on my porch to not wake up my kid.
Okay.
Ideologically, we might not always get what we want, but compromise is how good governing happens.
Well,
I always saw the value in that,
yeah.
and thus I could see where Bruce and that ad were coming from.
Yeah, like I have a really good friend that as he says, what bothers him the most is we have gotten out of that. You want safe borders, I want safe borders.
Mm-hmm.
We disagree how to do it.
Yep.
Let's get together and figure out how to accomplish that goal.
Yeah.
You want everyone to have health insurance. I want everyone to have health insurance. Yeah. Why can't we find somewhere where we can accomplish that goal? And it is, and we won't get too political, but it is just, I'm right, you're wrong, and there's nothing to discuss. And
the shades of gray have gone away over the years.
Yeah, and I do think that there is, and I know listeners, I certainly understand that there is a lot of politicians currently that are making very unwise choices from my perspective and are not, there is a lot of problems with our current two parties, but it does seem like my boss is similar to you. He now is a VP at the company I work, but for the longest time he was a political operative, and
mm-hmm.
he says, I didn't work Republican or Democrat, I picked people.
Yeah.
In other words, it was,
I've heard the same thing a lot.
Yeah, it was friends or people that I knew were good people, that I knew had the right heart, and so he helped their campaign. And so and I think that's interesting. Well, I tend to try to be as political as possible and try to share. I'm one of those silly people that calls my senator's office and calls my congressman and emails them, and it's
in most cases it works. In fact, I won't get into it. That was my that was actually my master's capstone was the more or less the effectiveness of citizen advocacy versus paid advocacy, if you will, the impact of grassroots citizens versus lobbyists and special interest groups, and it works. Citizen advocacy works.
Well, good. I sometimes feel like Senator Cruz and Senator Corman do not care because I'm in a very
I get it.
But I keep trying. I keep doing.
Yep.
Um, yeah. So getting back to Bruce.
Yep.
Hopefully he's going to tour.
Yeah.
And are there songs you haven't heard live that you want to hear?
So I thought that I had gotten to the point where I had pretty much gotten everything I'd wanted in concerts. But he complicated that a little bit by releasing Western Stars and Letter to You, which I think are both just absolute masterpieces.
Yeah.
And for me, Working on a Dream, Wrecking Ball, High Hopes, they had good songs. I could listen, but as albums, they haven't withstood the test of time for me,
Okay.
But Western Stars and Letter to You, I'm Western Stars came out over 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Letter came out last year. I haven't put them down since.
Yeah, and we got that great film.
Yes.
Western Stars, and I'm so jealous of that barn.
Yes.
I picture that's where they're having their Olympic watching party. He's put up a big screen TV in the barn, and and they're watching Jessica. I absolutely, and I often preface, like, not counting the 2 new albums, are there other songs you want to hear live?
Right.
But I would love to hear anything from those albums. I can't wait to hear If I Was the Priest.
Yep.
And Burning Train and Ghost and
and Song for Orphan. Ghosts. I mean, it's got to be the tour opener or the set list opener, I would think.
Yeah.
For a lot of the next tour, and assuming that we do eventually make it through the pandemic.
Yeah.
30,000 people 30,000 of your best friends around you, all screaming "I'm alive" at the top of your lungs. It's going to feel got to be the most cathartic thing ever.
I will tell you, I talked about this. Sarah Hickman, who is a singer-songwriter she grew up in Houston. She went to school in North Texas, and she now lives in Austin. And she does not perform live much anymore, but she played last Saturday night, as we record this, July 31st, at Port David's Pub in Dallas. And it was about maybe a couple hundred people in the club. It's a small club.
Yep.
And she sang and played, and I will tell you, it just felt so good to be in live music.
Yeah.
I mean, it felt so right.
Yeah, I get it. I have not had since the pandemic started, I don't think I've had the live music experience. So our daughter has a congenital heart defect, which you wouldn't know normally. Doesn't impact her at all from day to day. We wouldn't even know it existed if the doctor's not caught it just kind of randomly. But I've been operating under the assumption that if she were to get COVID, she would be at a higher risk for a complication from it. So
absolutely,
the indoor bars, the restaurants, I haven't done either of those since the pandemic started. My risk tolerance has been lower. Outdoor, I do it. I would absolutely do it.
Yeah.
Just haven't had that opportunity around here. But going back to, you said you tend to preface excluding the 2 new albums. I did come up with a couple. I really would like to see. I have not seen. I want to see Darkness front to back. I have not seen that yet. Something in the Night is a must for me. One that I would really like to see and hear. And then selfishly, I would also like to. I'd really like to see what the E Street Band could do with Mrs. McGrath.
Nice.
From the Seeger Sessions album. And that is because my parents and their friends have a band that plays traditional Irish music that gets together around St. Patrick's Day and does a few shows. And I performed with them for the first time last year. We got our show in the weekend before St. Patrick's Day, which I think was maybe 2 days before the
country shut down. Yeah.
Yep. And we have a what I think is a pretty darn good version of Mrs. McGrath that we
nice.
It's pretty similar to Bruce's version with the Sessions Band. So I would like to see what the E Street Band did with it or could do with it. and then compare it to what we do. But that's just for vanity's sake as much as
No, that sounds awesome. That's great. Wrapping us up.
Yeah.
Is there anything I haven't asked you besides the Mary question that I should have asked you?
I mean, I don't know exactly. That's a tough thing to respond to.
Well, I bring that up because years ago I finished the podcast. We had quit recording, and my guest said, and oh, by the way, next time I'm on, I'll have to tell you about when I got drunk with the E Street Band. What?
No, there's nothing like that happening.
Okay, what? No, how did you not lead with that story, right?
That's how.
Yeah.
You said, I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's how she gives herself back on the show a second time.
Exactly. All right.
You can't come with the best stuff up front. You got to.
I guess so. I don't know. Though you've come up with a lot of good stuff. You've been a great guest. All right. If you are a friend of Colin's and you're listening to this podcast, first off, thank you. Be sure and tell him what a great job he did. But the Mary question is how we end every podcast. Jay Armstrong is a former honors English teacher. He is recently retired. He is working on a book, but he would spend 2 days of his honors English class when they were seniors going over Thunder Road. They would go through all the lyrics. He would look at the imagery. They would discuss the different themes of the poem. And then at the end of the 2 days, he would ask the question, does Mary get in the car? So Colin, that is your question.
Okay.
Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
All right. So for those of you who have not been on Jesse's show and are thinking about it someday or may, in addition to making you feel very comfortable, one of the things that he will do is give you a heads up of some of the questions that might be asked. And so I tried to make sure that I came prepared with some notes. And this is the one that I agonized over the most, because I wanted to come up with something that would be deep and would wow people and really get people thinking. And I realized I wasn't smart enough to do something like that. So the obvious answer hit me here. But relating it back to you say his name was Jay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Jay's class, my answer is going to kind of remind me of, I don't remember if it was a meme or what I saw online, but it was somebody had gotten on their college application. I might have even been to an Ivy League school. The question was, they were supposed to answer the question, what is bravery? And the girl wrote down, this is. That was her answer, writing down a 2-word answer. So my deep answer that I was coming up with that was going to get some people thinking is going to come down to this. Mary gets in the car in Thunder Road because otherwise she couldn't have gotten pregnant in the river.
There you go. That's it.
That's what I came up with.
I think that's a fine answer. Very well done, sir. Very good. I like that answer. What else someone brought up is that absolutely she gets in the car because on Racing in the Street, she is on her daddy's porch, which is the same porch she danced across.
There you go.
So, very
That's
nice.
Fantastic answer.
Yeah, it was. All right, Colin, this has been great. I appreciate it so much. We will have to do this again.
I'd be happy.
Yeah. So if someone wants to reach you, how's the best way?
Oh, I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. Generally pretty approachable, but I'm on Twitter @DonkeyDownburst is me. It's mostly storm chasing and weather, but you get a little bit of everything: some Bruce, some baseball and sports, some politics, some bad humor. All the above can come from that account. It's the best way to get a hold of me. I've got a YouTube channel. I've got a website, but start with the Twitter, and that's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
And I think the next time we have you on, I'm sure there'll be something Bruce to talk about, but also I'd love to hear more stories about chasing the storms.
I'd be happy.
I'm sure you have plenty of stories on those.
Tons of them.
Very good. All right, listeners, thank you for joining me. Please, we appreciate you listening. And if you want to join us, as Colin said, I try to make it easy as possible. Would love to have more of you join me. For now, go get vaccinated. Remember to wear a mask. Remember social distance. The only way we're going to get through this is being good to each other. And so thank you for all you do. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Thank you to my Patreons: Andrew Goddard, Betsy Hodges, Levi Petri, Elizabeth Bronson, Stephen Malio, Holly Mack, Steve Rogers, Dale Hosick, Terry Smith, Anna Lynn, Chris Bloom, and Mary Thomas. You all are my monthly angels. Thank you so much for the love and support you give on this podcast. You are greatly appreciated.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thanking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. Set Listing Bruce is part of the Southgate Media podcast group. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.